Good evening. Good evening, everybody here in Budapest and also in Gather Town. This is the event, Local Cosmologies and Comparative Etnofuturists. I am Márió Nemes, poet and critic and founding member of the so-called hungarouturism movement, and I am the host and moderator of this evening. And I will shortly describe the dramatical structure of the evening and also introduce the panelists. I have to describe shortly also the conception of the evening. The aim of the event is a comparative analysis of contemporary speculations about the future in Central and Eastern Europe in an artistic theoretical context. The focus is on contemporary futurism, research into collective art movements, ossifuturism, hungarouturism, which subject the study of alternative futures and paths to a political aesthetic critique. The social relevance of artistic experimentation with time and history comes to the fore as the ability to think about alternatives and differences is one of the cultural media for the production of social imagination. That's the short concept of the evening, and in a structural way, first we have two lecture performances. The first lecture performance is held by Rike Flämig. Rike Flämig is a performer, choreographer, and cultural worker, creating documentary, site-specific and Eastern futuristic works, reflecting on power structures at work while making visible underseen perspectives. And the title of the lecture performance of Rike Flämig is Looking Back on Ossifuturism. And after that, the second lecture performance is about hungarouturism. The title is Sirius Exe. And I will do this performance together with my co-moderator and co-host Zsolt Miklósvölgyi, also a founding member of hungarouturistic movement. After the lecture performances, we have two research statements. The first research statement is from Bohal, who will talk about Xeno futures and xenology. And Bohal is currently a PhD candidate at Charles University Prague, focusing on Xeno Feminism, feminist theory, critical cultural theory, and philosophy of technology. After that, Daniel Grúň is entering the stage, and the title of Daniel Grúň's lecture is Julius Scholars, Archives and Hidden Future of Atlantis. Daniel Grúň is art historian, and currently he is working at the Julius Scholars Society. Okay, and this is the and after that, after the last lecture, we will have a discussion between the panelists, but we are open to questions from the audience also, and we try to build a new and interesting and inspiring discourse for all of you. Thank you, and I ask Rike to come and enter the stage. Thank you.
Hello, is this working? So welcome. Thank you for your interest in ossifuturism. Ossifuturism, as you know, is this philosophical and cultural historical trend that influenced the last 100 years. Now, last year, in 2090, I was very happy that we could celebrate 100 years of ossifuturism. I hosted this event, the 100-year celebration, together with my colleague Anna Henschel and Swazi Clark. And we were very happy that we could actually invite quite some reenactments from the year 2042, 2063, and the other crucial year, as you know, in the waves of history, as you can also see here, history is always going in waves, 2082, another reenactment. It was a room with islands. People were around these islands in the 100-year celebration. And as you know now, in 2090, we're in a completely different timing, planned timing. The good thing was that in preparation for the 100-year celebration, we were actually finding very good material that we could refer to. For example, we had this very interesting zine that some artists had produced in 2020 that I would like to introduce to you. They called it Postart Zinn. And they, as you can see here, were referring back to the time that inspired them. That was actually the starting point of ossifuturism, 1989, 1990, the time when the wall came down, when the feminist movement in East Germany was very strong, when they invented a lot of utopia, how the world could be different than what they had experienced. So in 2020, they rediscovered the sources from 1990 and projected it actually until our times into 2090, where we are now. So they were using the strategy of rememory, going back and forwards, remembering possible futures, and also referring to the time even before. Maybe I read for you some of the sources they were referring to. For example, quickly in German, Reparationsforderungen der Frauen. Wir Frauen aus Ost und West fordern, als minimale Reparation für die uns im Laufe der Geschichte des Patriarchats zugefügten Schäden, die Übergabe des gesamten zur Disposition stehenden PDS-Vermögens an einen fernhin näher beschriebenen Frauenförderungstopf. Yeah, in 1990, the independent women movement were actually asking to reuse the money from the former Communist Party, as they were not, it was not needed anymore for anything else, to use it for empowerment of women and marginalized voices. And actually, this is now why all these artworks that we have in ossifuturism is blossoming, could develop in all these 100 years. That's where it started, and that's what they were fighting for. And you see how much fruitful artworks have come from that time until now. Also, very interesting, Samira Kenavi, she was actually collecting all these feminist utopias, all the things the people wrote down, and is an important source that they could refer to in 2020. And she was complaining that the right for abortion was not having much place anymore, and at the same time pornography was growing everywhere like mushrooms, she says. And there we have a very interesting comic from Emeset Chornai showing this mushroom growth, and also sharing some examples from 2020 where a lot of women are selling their breast milk. So some stuff from 1990, 1989 has inspired these artists from 2020. So they collected these sources. But actually, what is important is not only content-wise, but also aesthetically. They were referring to the time where ossifuturism started. Like here, maybe we recall it together. Now we're in 2091. In 2020, some artists rediscovered the vibrant moves, the inspiration in this gap, where a lot of feminist utopias have started, and then were reconsidering it. And I mean, you know, these peaks where it has influenced the developments in society now. But before, in 1984, the women's group in Erfurt was founded, where they created a lot of excessive costumes, and also Fine Kwiatkowski, maybe you have heard of Intermedia, 1985, punks, intellectuals, artists, met over 1,000 people, were actually improvising, very transdisciplinary. And but I have heard that, or I read actually, that the most interesting exchange has started in small groups, small exchange in the little places in Leipzig where they improvised transdisciplinary with free jazz, of course. (1985), and the aesthetics from that time were crucial, leading through history. And I want to share with you now the three reenactments that we had. 2042, Bak Hoalan, referring to the worker situation in East Germany, and also from the Vertragsarbeiter, the guest workers, contract workers, Vietnamese contract workers that were working in East Germany at the time, and their working conditions. What is very interesting is that this rememory led to having different monuments, like hologram monuments. For example, a plate on the floor where you could hear different sounds and hear and experience vibes of the techno movement in these 1990s, like 100 years ago, when people were dancing in these empty places in Berlin and elsewhere. And also, there was this other hologram where one woman was climbing on the shoulder of the other, referring to the double load of work that women had to face in these times. And not a hologram, but more of a artwork, very soft from cotton. It was like a flower, or the inside of a vagina. And there surrounding were stories of migrant workers that were forced to abortion. They were not allowed to give birth. Remembering the future and the past in different ways. So Bak Hoalan was showing his artwork, showing the workers' situation, sewing, cutting throughout the 100-year celebration. Also, we had Devlog 363. Very interesting because during the pandemics 2020 and also 2040, there was a lot of isolation happening. So the people were really reducing themselves in the countryside, being quite by themselves. So it's a piece on narcissism. And then the last piece, 2082, is reflecting on, as you know, the re-establishment of community. I don't know, probably you have heard about the Freilet, this practice of folk song that they started in 2080s, and also these groups of 12 that people started to gather in and to live in. These groups had a lot of social practices that were inspired by artists, and they were also practicing quite some songs for reconciliation, for communication, to retrain themselves. How can it be to connect? Like, for example, I mean, if I share the tune with you, I'm sure you will remember. Mijn Goldgebinde deine Hand, ik pleit het vrijheid band. Voorwee, 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 voorwee. Farewell, farewell.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Zsolt Miklósvölgyi, and as Márió previously mentioned in the introduction, I am also the co-founder of the hungarouturism movement. Together with Márió, we have read the manifesto you can find online. Tonight what we have prepared is an integral part of our whole endeavor. And there is a new travel program we want to launch soon. So we are now here as a travel agent, and you here in Budapest will be one of our focus group for the travel program. The other one will be, of course, citizens of Gather Town. So there will be a link, or there is already a link in the comment session. Please feel free to go throughout our travel catalog. So the name of the travel project is entitled Sirius.exe. As you may already know, hungarouturism is a mytho-fiction project that is aiming to reclaim back the rights and forces to forming narratives with regards to nationalism and nationalist thinking in opposition to the ruling nationalist forces who are trying to monopolize this. So what we are interested in is to reclaiming back and then altering it towards a better, brighter, more equal future. Sirius.exe is an integral part of this project because this is our homeland from where we all from. And to where we all want to return. So what we want to do is to make this destination, this homeland, taking a little bit more approachable for you throughout this program called Sirius.exe. Just very briefly, allow me please to go through the whole statement which somehow contextualizes the aims of the Sirius.exe. The Luciferian Bolsheviks have hijacked the original cosmic intentions of the revolutionary forces, aiming to expand the emancipatory energies towards interplanetary proportions. However, if we look through the post-Soviet landscapes of Eastern Europe, we can see the reminiscences of hidden modernity in the forms of cosmic communist constructions, edifices, sculptures, and cosmic murals. The Luciferian Bolsheviks, however, are committed to telluric realm of materialist politics and earthly possessions, and therefore they have obstructed the astral Comintern to unfold in its full potential towards the evolutionary level above human. Their telluric empire may have fallen after 1991, but the Luciferian programming did not end with the downfall. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the chthonic reactionary forces, including illiberals, neo-fascists, globalists, bourgeoisie, and capitalists, have regrouped themselves, and thus the great cosmic awakening and the journey to the kingdom of the Sirius has been postponed for this time. And now this is the time that we will take over and we start launching the Sirius.exe program. So without further ado, I would like to give the microphone to Márió, or the voice to Márió, and allow him to explain briefly what is the prophecy behind this whole travel program.
Yes, there is a central prophecy in the Trevor Program, and if you are following this prophecy, then you must know that as was promised, the keys to our Sirius interstellar homeland are here again, in Sirius.exe. You have to launch Sirius.exe to realize the prophecy. And Sirius.exe it's a so-called transformation program. If you launch this, it will transform you to, and you can reach a new shape of spiritual wisdom. You can enter a new stage, the evolutionary level above human. And in this form, in this new life form, that into you have to transform yourself, you can travel to space and reach the Sirius system, the origin point of humanity and also hungarouturism. But the most important point, the turning point, is this Xeno transformation.
So as Márió has pointed out, there is a transformative aspect to it. But the reason why it is a prophecy and why we call it a Sirius.exe is not only because of the file format of it, but it's also an exegesis. It's an explanation of some sort, and therefore I would like to also point out that the reasoning behind such program and the necessity of this program is because the planet Earth is about to be recycled due to anthropogenic global warming and the consequences. For instance, based on trends determined by scientific researchers and also about all the doomer hidden sects of the internet. This could be a few years, but also from it could happen in decades from now. The reason is that these are various threats that are contributing to a near human extinction state. And what is more important is that there are specific symptoms of planet Earth's illnesses both on social, psychological, ecological, and spiritual level. And therefore, there is a need to face that there is a close of an age. The Luciferian programming, as I have pointed out previously, operates on multiple levels, such as in the form of wars, in which nations are involved in ethnic cleansing, as well as in form of a multitude environmental threats. Not to mention examples of habitat destruction, deforestation, ocean acidification, pollution, air pollution, water pollution, radioactive releases, etc. So this is not only simply a part of a natural recycling process, it is rather the whole situation that makes this whole Sirius.exe and the whole travel program actually important. This is an uttermost important, and the only way to realize it is to win the battle in between the chthonic reactionary forces and the true believers of the cosmic awakening. But talking of the cosmic awakening and their two true believers, maybe Márió, you have some comments with regards to their physiognomy and their bodily shapes.
Yes, the bodily shapes are very important in this sense because we are facing this apocalyptic recycling, and we have two opportunities: extinction or awakening. And if you choose the awakening, then you have transformed your complete bodily, physiognomically structure. And if you are launching the Sirius.exe, if you are embracing this eschatological virus, then your body, that we are just naming planetary vehicle, is, forming a spiritual spaceship. And this interplanetary vehicle that into your body is transforming can rescue you, and you can manage a new way out of this apocalyptic situation.
Talking of vehicles, there is another form of vehicle as well, in which all the planetary vehicles going to be carried towards the Sirius, and that is a mothership. There is first class only. We are talking about fully automated luxury communism here. Everyone will have top-notch services, and everyone will have first class only. There are no second, third classes whatsoever. The most important part is maybe the architecture or the geometry of the mothership, which is shaped like a pyramid and vary in sizes from 1,000 yards up to 5 miles in height. Small ones carry 7 to 9 petrol vessels from the kingdom of God. The large ones, up to 7,000 petrol vessels. The very large ones make deep space probes outside the system in the galaxies beyond. The motherships come within 500 miles of Earth, sometimes according to the position of the moon and magnetic forces emanating from the sun. They approach nearer the cancelling, nearer the Earth's surface than that. They are propelled by a magnetic device as well that exerts an equal thrust upon every atom of substance within the ship, thereby cancelling out any effects of gravitational weight, which may be caused by high acceleration within the gravitational pull of the planetary body. The carrier vessels are made of an organic metal called turanium, which is susceptible to a concentration of political thought waves emanated by their operators. This substance is thought to be self-reproducing. They are protected by the force field, which is intensified in directed relation to the velocity of the craft. This force field reflects and refracts light and causes a fuzzy effect on photographic plates. This is the whole science behind. But more important is that it is also a spiritually designed spaceship, and we have very good news for both to the citizens of Gather town and also here in Budapest, that we have prepared boarding passes for you. There are spiritual boarding passes that will allow you to enter the mothership, and until the final launching of the first expedition, you will have all the comfort that the mothership can provide. So I hereby would like to take the opportunity to invite everyone towards this journey, because this is the journey that has always been meant to us. This is from where we have come to Earth, and this is where to where we shall return for now and forever, always forward and upward. This would be the Sirius.exe. Thank you very much, and come with us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's quite an honor to speak at the Goethe-Institut in Budapest, and I would also like to thank our gracious hosts and travel agents for this possibility for me to travel here. Without further ado, because time is pressing, as it always is, I will get into the presentation, which will focus on a bit of a phenomenon in the theory art spheres and philosophy art spheres. This is the concept and also the problem of the Xeno. That's X-E-N-O, Xeno. So as a very preliminary sort of foray into the whole field, into the whole discourse, just to name a few examples of this, as Márió mentioned, I'm currently writing a PhD thesis at the Center for Critical Cultural Theory at Charles University, and I'm writing it on Xeno Feminism, a very vibrant, interesting approach to the study of xenology, and one which has yielded much, I think, great theoretical material as well as practical. But the list goes on. We have Armin Avanesian et al. Recently drafting or publishing a wonderful book of interviews featuring Patricia Reed, Benjamin Bratton, Anke Hennig, and others on Xeno architecture. The title is Perhaps What We Need is a Xeno Architecture to Match. We have the hungarouturistic cabal publishing the Xenotopia magazine. So again, there's this constant use of Xeno in the contemporary art philosophy scene, with, for example, Iskra Delta Biennale currently launching a catalog called Xenoslavia. So this is the general discourse, this is the general field at which I posit my analysis of the Xeno, because it is a question, and it has been getting addressed as such, oftentimes in quite virile arguments about what exactly does qualify as the Xeno and what doesn't, and who gets to decide. So to give a very basic formal analysis of the actual morph Xeno, it's of Greek origin. We have Zenos, which in English is translated as stranger, foreigner, strange friend. In classical Greek texts and epics and drama, it's the beggar at the door who might also be a god, who might also be Zeus, who comes in and interacts in quite irritant ways, and within a protocol. And this is the second aspect of the Xeno in the traditional sense, of the protocol of Xenia, which was ultimately an institution of hospitality, which begged a certain protocol, a certain procession of accommodation and hospitality offered to the guest. So this is, as I said, a very basic formal analysis of what actually the Xeno connotes. But xenology, contemporary xenology, definitely does not look back on the Greek use, but merely uses it as type of a functional platform from which to actually provoke certain possible contemporary iterations and contemporary effects of the word. But to stay with it a bit longer, the Latin cognate is actually host. which gives rise to the English words and widely shared cognates of hospitality, but also hostility. And this actually makes Derrida in 1995 coin the term hospitality to address this very complex and ambivalent relationship of guest and host. So these are all good things to consider when we're launching into an analysis of what the contemporary Zeno might actually entail. And what I want to posit here is that it signifies on two levels. One is the figural and one is the temporal. If we start with the figural, which is sort of much more easily approachable also with the introduction I gave of the Zeno actually being a figure of an alien, of an encroaching force from the outside, somehow morphing and somehow interacting with a seemingly coherent inside or socius. The Zeno has been, particularly in the Xeno feminist wider discourse, has been critiqued by, for example, Annie Go and other brilliant theorists on its capacity, or rather incapacity, to formulate a progressive and usable identity politics. And it's my contention that the Zeno is a bit of a red flag for many people, simply to actually speak about what it might entail and might not. And what we see is an inheritance of Zeno as somehow being commensurate with xenophobia. And this really loses a lot of the complexity of the term and a lot of the also future potential of the term to which it can be applied. For example, we have Annie Go critiquing the appropriation of the Zeno by Xeno Feminism as a type of new universalism, as a type of expansion of identity beyond a manageable level. And this is, to come back to the argument, a largely figural approach to it, a sort of defining of bodies, an intersectional analysis of embodiment, because a lot of these thoughts are undoubtedly coming from a feminist background of intersectionality and later fourth wave feminism. The alternative reading of the Zeno, as I mentioned, is the temporal one, and I think this is the one which really fits into the whole concept which we're analyzing here, which is the anti-dystopian Congress, because to use the work of Armin Avanesian here once more, the recently published collection Etnofuturisms starts with an introduction written by Avanesian and Mahan Moallemi, and there they actually speak about xenofuturities. And this is where the Zeno really opens up to the future. The logic behind Armin Avanesian's and Moallemi's thinking is that there is a sort of a trope which we can call the formation of time from the future. Now, I saw this great quote here, which we have: today's knowledge that will shape the future. And I think in this logic of a speculative temporality, as Avanesian calls it, we could say the future which shapes today's knowledge. The idea is that the future actually erupts into our present and somehow defines itself, makes itself come to being. This is a hyperstition, as the accelerationists call it, and it's the science of self-fulfilling prophecies. So we're faced with a question of how actually the future comes to be, and what role the alien and the Zeno might be able to claim in it. And if we look to this notion of one of the founding members of the Laboria Cubonics Collective, which is the collective which drafted the Xeno Feminist Manifesto, or rather Xeno Feminism, A Politics for Alienation in 2014, launched 2015, and in 2018 actually republished by Verso. If we look at the work of Helen Hester in her subsequent book Xeno Feminism, published in 2018 by Polity, she really analyzes this concept of xeno-hospitality. And I believe that this concept and the way she uses it to actually challenge a sort of standing reproductive politics in favor of a mutational logic, which is able to extrapolate itself into the future while retaining a fundamental connection with hospitality as a founding or as a fundamental arena for the Xeno, as I mentioned before. It really sort of rewires a lot of the ire and the apprehensions about the Xeno as it is interpreted in contemporary discourse, and particularly this negative ring through its association with xenophobia, and the way it has been employed in neo-reactionary, alt-right, and other accelerationist circles. So that's a very very simple or very quick overview of Xeno. And without further ado, I'd like to end there and hand the stage to Daniel Grúň.
Hello. Thank you for being here. This contribution will be a modest attempt to present a reading list by Julius Scholar from the 1970s to relate it to his lifetime artistic work, culminating in the 1990s and at the beginning of the new millennium. I will introduce a new approach towards Julius Scholar's artistic practice called here Cosmology of Uncertainty, highlighting the universal futurological vector of anti-dystopian question mark in theory and practice. The question mark is a symbol of doubt, Julius Scholar says. I doubt everything, but not in a pessimistic sense, in a realistic sense. Questions and asking questions are aimed against illusions, against lies and ignorance. They help us to see and know things and implications realistically. I will focus on performative gestures of becoming an extraterrestrial. I refer here to the notion of becoming by Gilles Deleuze and Judith Butler's performative theory of subject. Judith Butler argues that our social identity is performative, shaped in a complex process by the forces of social conventions that are repeated in our actions. The performative must happen many times in order to become through the gesture as if for the first time. The tireless, systematic reaffirmation of the UFO performative points to the non-originality, the fabrication of reality proving to be a construct. Performative gestures of becoming UFO nautical open up space in ordinary everyday situations to enter materialist mysticism and speculative views on unknown phenomena. The term materialist mysticism would refer to psychedelic culture understood by Mark Fisher and Jeremy Gilbert as a set of practices and ideas which are at one and the same time mystical and materialist. This materialist mysticism acknowledges the complex potentialities of human embodied existence without tying that recognition to any set of supernatural or theistic beliefs. This materialist mysticism would treat the investigation of technologies of non-self as one of its key priorities, Jeremy Gilbert says. Cultural situations by J.K. are realized in the everyday environment to transform them into inhuman territories in the process of becoming extraterrestrial. Scholar's becoming is in line with Deleuze becoming minoritarian, so we can understand it as spreading a series of repeated signals, establishing minority territory, which is also related to the territorialization of language, connection of the individual directly to the political sphere. Julius Scholar is fixing each performative gesture in the language of this system, UFO. Georg Schollhammer says, in his manifesto, from which over the following 30 years and more, Scholar's main group of works of the same name was to develop universal cultural futurological operations, UFO. The realistic, anti-illusionist approach to the anti-happenings and anti-picture is underscored again. However, its possibility for realization is postponed for the future and ironically embedded in a cosmology of uncertainty, the pseudoscience of extraterrestrial flying objects. With UFO, a complex reference and relationship system arises between the acts of designation and their possibility of mutating. In various works in subsequent years, the O has assumed the names of object or ornament or orientation or observation or opustenie obrazu, release of the image, or otáznik, question mark, etc., etc. The F has mutated into functional, folkloristic, factographic, philosophic, fantastic, flyer, and so forth. The universal cultural situations that UFO designates can become typical cultural situations, new cultural situations, flying cultural situations, cultic cultural situations, objective cultural situations. Universal functional expertises can be imagined. The designating acts of the UFO are applied to every possible medium, to actions, drawings, to books, objects, and maps, to texts and installations. If I were to admit any connection in Julius Scholar's work with the later introduced term etnofuturism, then I would argue that this connection is in Scholar's search for the disappeared civilizations and their cultures. One such civilization was the Celtic tribes in Central Europe. Scholar focused on some aspects of their material culture. For example, the stone head of a Celtic druid from Mszeckie Jehorovice in the Czech Republic, founded in 1943, is one of the most essential objects in the collections of the National Museum in Prague. Not only did he sketch it several times into his notebooks, but with this druid's head, he also identified himself as a ufonaut, JK. The head was probably created at the end of the 3rd or the beginning of the 2nd century BC, and its design represents the most perfect work among similar sculptures created outside the realm of classical civilizations. In the book, The Archaic Revival, Terence McKenna discusses his investigations into relations between flying saucers and psychedelics. I quote, "The postmodern phase of UFO speculation recognizes that the UFO is no mere light seen in the sky, but that it is somehow mixed up with human psychology. Researchers have determined that people who have seen UFOs were in many cases thinking about something very odd and unusual immediately prior to the sighting. The UFOs seem to act as a kind of ideological catalyst for some purpose." McKenna continues, "The UFO come from another dimension, somehow totally different from our own, but tied up with the human psyche in a way that is puzzling, alarming, and reassuring, and shamanic." End of quote. McKenna suggests that a flying saucer is an object from the collective unconscious that appears to break the control of any set of ideas that are gaining dominance in their explanatory power at the expense of ethics. In Julius Scholar's artistic and pseudo-scientific hypothesis, Celtic civilization meets Atlantis, Atlantis meets Bermuda Triangle, and Bermuda Triangle meets the disappearance of art between nature, politics, and life. The Bermuda Triangle is a triangular area in the Atlantic Ocean bounded roughly at its points by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. A legend has it that many people, ships, and planes have mysteriously vanished in this area. Bermuda Triangle represents the unknown phenomena in the atmosphere accompanied by the disappearance of ships and aircrafts. Among various hypotheses and theories in the 1970s that illuminate the mysterious catastrophes in that triangle, the most popular was the book by Charles Berlitz. In the book, Berlitz elaborates upon several theories for the purported disappearances. One of those theories states that Bermuda Triangle was actually a byproduct of the destruction of Atlantis. Behind popular pseudo-scientific hypotheses, Koller saw the visual patterns he fixed in his works. These geometric patterns, or archetypal symbols derived from the theory of world cultures, are responsible for the mysterious disappearances of objects. I quote J.K. "My cosmological drawings contained the underlying concepts of my personal mythology and my outlook on the world. It's mainly about the unknown blank areas in the history of humanity which are related to the mystery of contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations, with so-called gods, with life on Earth. They included an investigation of spaces between conventional and non-traditional science, between ideas and beliefs." End of quote. The triangle is the Egyptian symbol of deity, the Jewish symbol of unity, the Pythagorean wisdom, the alchemical and Christian attribute of the Trinity. Koller studied the transformations of graphic signs, symbols, signs that various cultures in history used as unifying, but in modern totalitarian regimes and ideologies began to act as dividing and hostile signs. After the breakup of Czechoslovakia, Koller focused mainly on Slovak national symbols and their transformations into signs of fascist ideologies. He retained cryptic ambiguity in the use of these signs in his works, in which it is complicated to determine whether they were painted by a critical mind or a passionate zealous. Nevertheless, they work by such a strong extrapolation of the theme that the sharpened lines representing the national symbol of Triple Mountain, by the way derived from Hungary's coat of arms, intertwined with the Celtic network, intersect alarmingly with the swastika emblem. In these works, Koller foreshadows the undercurrents of diabolical evil, neo-Nazi, ultranationalist, and xenophobic sentiments in his country which persist to this day. Simultaneously, with repeated overuse, accumulation, and spreading, these mysterious pseudo-Nazi and pseudo-nationalist symbols are for Koller signs of energies and signals transmitted into the cosmos. The magical signs of the wavy line, zigzag, and question mark are archaic signs taken from archaeological artifacts of ancient cultures, and at the same time they mean the elementary movement of particles in space-time. Electromagnetic waves, seismic waves, sound waves that spread into the cosmos as signals contaminated by human illusions and failures. The question remains whether the reduction of archetypal symbols to wavy lines means that the symbols of evil are like an intruder who can infiltrate everywhere, or is this reduction instead a warning against the simplistic abbreviations of these universal emblems? Koller's work pose but do not answer this question. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the panelists and the presenters. Also thank you very much for Goethe-Institut for organizing and inviting us. I think before we start gathering or collecting questions from the audience and also from citizens of Gather Town, I would give the opportunity for all the panelists if you have any questions with regards to the general topic of our panel or to each specific, whether it be artist state or artist performative statement or a research-oriented lecture. Please feel free. I don't really want to coordinate this. Let's flourish as much as we can.
Yeah, I just join Zsolt in this topic. Let's flourish and boom. And if you have comments or questions to each other or the whole topic, then let's do it and let's talk about it.
Then perhaps I will start with
maybe you should.
What I was thinking of listening to all the presentations and what really energized me is this kind of overlapping thematics when it comes to the regionality or the scalability of cosmologies and future forward thinking. So what I wanted to address as a general question for everyone, how would you describe or how would you grasp this kind of paradoxity, but hopefully it's like a fruitful paradoxity in between localities and cosmology, in between transregionality and let's say planetary, inter or even post-planetary visions. Is it important from where these visions are coming from, or are they infiltrating and altering, also in the sense of Xeno formation, altering the already existing? It's invading, and then throughout this invasion opens up a new possibility. So that's my overarching question for everyone, how it reflects in your practice and so forth.
Maybe we start with ossifuturism. It's not any futurism, it's ossi, and ossi means it's a derogatory word for East Germans, often used by West Germans, and it's sort of a very specific word from a specific discourse, from a specific time of not visibility or lower visibility in the local discourse. So we chose to invent this ossifuturism to give visibility to a certain lineage of creation and also to a certain time in history. So it's very, very specific, and at the same time it was very amazing to find out that you with hungarouturism have also a very concrete form of Eastern futurism, and also understand and discover that, of course, the logic that is applied is very similar, like Avanesian is analyzing nicely, comparing the different futurisms. So the logic is the same or similar, but what it applies to is very specific. And the magic lies in the combination of both, or the game back and forth.
In that sense, the Eastern, is it a burden or is it also something that has a resource to somehow transcend this kind of stigmatization, let's say so? So how this two works?
I just wanted to add that I think that futuristic thinking is always it has always glocal aspects. It has always global and local aspects, and those are fused together. That always we are dealing with futuristic thinking, but we always are rooted in the local geo-cultural aspects, but that doesn't mean that we don't think in a global way also in the same time. And for us in the hungarouturistic movement, this is an important thing, and I think it with the ossifuturism that is also that you are dealing with local and global problems in the same time. But I wanted to ask, are there, VESI reflections to the ossifuturism? Are there coming, comments or something like that from a VESI perspective?
Yeah, in the team, when we developed the dance production on ossifuturism Postart 2090, we had also West Germans involved. And it was very interesting to find out also, the specific Eastern skills that they also appreciate, but also it was different from what from an Eastern perspective would have been emphasized. So it was very interesting to be in conversation about it. But it was nice to give it a clear form and also a little bit crazy form, projecting it into the future. So it was sort of, we were putting it into the room to be able to start talking about it or to find a formulation or a form for what is there as a special heritage that should be passed on. So we pretended it did.
Thank you. Vitek, Daniel?
Sure. I guess I'll pick up on this relationship between locality and a type of cosmology and its projection onto the future. I'd just like to sort of introduce an aspect which is obviously shared in a post-human way as materially, which is sexual dimorphism and the way basically it translates into gender. And with the question of gender, I think this is a universal anthropological feature which appears in human societies, and there it's actually, and contemporaneously, it's very interesting to see just how the future of gender is being played for, and the future of gender is actually being determined. Of course, we can look to the V4 countries, in fact, in this regard, because the discussions and the debates have been virulent and quite in the forefront of the media. So this obviously, I'm coming from a type of Xeno Feminist politics of alienation and new gender politics. Which proposes to be, unapologetic about the plasticity of the concept of gender, but this is not shared universally, so to speak. And I think this is where the locality really comes into play in regard to an absolutely distributed aspect of gender making, which is just innate to the human.
Maybe I would react to the question with this notion of cosmology of uncertainty, and within this notion and within the uncertainty that is embedded into imagining futures and cosmologies, I think that the notion or this lost place called Atlantis match Sirius Exe, also as a place which is kind of a myth, but also could turn in some kind of perspective for the future. And Julius Scholar imagined Atlantis also as a kind of underground civilization and meeting place. And on the other hand, Bermuda Triangle was imagined as a place of disappearances. So as a kind of like a window to the cosmos. So you have to disappear first so that you can appear somewhere else.
Sorry, I was not candy crushing on my phone. I was just trying to collect all the questions from Gather Town. And Daniel, this actually very much connects to what you were talking about. There are two questions. One is from Marcus, who is interested in saying that it would be great to hear more about the future erupting into the present, as in a sense of how that affects present politics. And Wenzel also asks Daniel that and how this would mean. What do you think by the mean of future in this context? Is it a temporal future? Is it other kind of future? That would be, I think, interesting to maybe go on. But not only you, Daniel, but maybe we can also jump in.
Yeah. I think that we share this question, and I will try to be very short. And I think that what you introduced in your lecture performance at the beginning, like, was the reaction of privatization of certain nationalist thinking, and I mean, like, introducing Zeno here is the way how we can think through and find the possibilities of action. And although Julius Scholar is not alive anymore, like, his work is somehow also the vehicle with which we could move forward. And the notion, just very shortly to answer the second question, for Julius Scholar, all his activity was directed to future, was futurological, and was also at the same time embedded in everyday reality. So I think that I feel always when I enter his work that the ideas that he introduced were postponed for today, and postponed for their reception is postponed for the next time. So I think that it could be interpreted and reintroduced different ways in the future.
I'm sorry, what was the question again? The two questions?
So the general question was that at least it was addressed particularly to Daniel, but the reason is that's what Marcus asks, is that that future that is erupting into the present, does this have a force to also alter or change politics, whether it's big cultural politics or generally like making politics?
Erupting future like a political force. Yeah. The future as a political force that we are, dealing with the force and the incoming energy of future speculations. How can or is it? Can we see this force of futurity in a political context? What does it mean? Can it change cultural politics?
I think in that regard, Rike's performance was really nice with this jumping back and forth and how this can influence back and forth.
Yeah, and I think that it's not for nothing that often marginalized voices, marginalized groups are projecting how they see the world or want the world to be like into the future, because the now is already occupied. But space is not occupied yet, the future is not occupied yet, so this is really a free space, a potential space where we can first imagine, and when we manage to imagine, then we can also live it or put it into the reality. So I think it's actually, the future is a very important field to inhabit, and it's a quite exciting area to explore. And it's huge. So that's nice to be at home there, or to start to have maybe tools and skills how to navigate inside the future and jump back and forth.
I think it's very interesting that and important that Rike addressed this. Even though now we have a very specific Central Eastern European or Eastern European locality or local perspective, as Márió addressed, But we also have to acknowledge that there are other forms of futurities coming oftentimes from whether it be political, cultural, or other kinds of minorities. We can talk about indigenous futurities, we can talk about Roma futurism, we can talk about Xeno futurism, Gulf futurism. So there is a whole emerging, a radiation of different futurities from the peripheries. And that's an interesting and another topic to address, maybe if these kind of peripheral or transperipheral futurities can unite. Is there a chance?
Like a futuristic coalition.
Yeah, or a Comintern.
Yeah, or interact or relate, because unite, then we have another huge thing. So I think it would be interesting to get to know all of the, but to interact and to collaborate and to be completion as fight side by side or imagine side by side, that could maybe be an option.
Zeitgenosse.
All these things are certainly important. One thing maybe which I would like to throw into the discussion is if we look from the perspective of, let's say, Anthropocene studies, which have been sort of trending in the past while, there's this notion of deep time, which is quite fascinating, where we're unearthing geological time, basically, and looking at the formation not only of our planet, but also of fossils and the wider solar system. I just want, in terms of this discussion, to actually extend it the other way, to actually find like a deep future. And I think this might be a very interesting kind of case study or a little sandbox where to illustrate this future erupting into the present and actually defining our present. And one of these things is actually quite topical. It's the question of nuclear energy and the question of nuclear waste disposal, which will be getting traction most certainly in the next few years. Considering the Green New Deal and the potential transfer to atomic energy as actually a green form of energy, and nobody knows what to do with nuclear waste. It's really fascinating that we have on the whole planet, we don't have structures which are able to contain it for, let's say, 10,000 years. This is a horizon which people simply haven't grappled with yet, and so far it seems that we're actually so far not able to deal with it. There's a fascinating project which is actually being done with an American institution and the Czech Technical University. It's actually the vitrification of nuclear waste. They want to put it into glass and then encase it in steel and then store it, because if you put it into glass, it becomes inert. So all I'm saying is that it seems that there is a future sort of in store, and it's up to us today to deal with it in some way, knowing very well the way nuclear waste functions and the pollutant effect it might have.
I think there was an absolutely like a pinpoint argument also regarding to what we have comments from Gathertown. Marcus saying that it is interesting, this deep time concept of Anthropocene on a planetary level. There is a timeline that excludes human beings anyways. So what non-human futurism would come from there? That's the question. But I think these are also like general questions we can move on forward. Unfortunately, time is not on our side as it has never been. So therefore, I think I would like to use this 1 minute to say thank you for all the panelists. Rike, Flämig, Vitek, Bohal, Daniel Grúň, and together with Márió, Nemes, and my name is Zsolt Miklósvölgyi, we were organizing and hosting together with the Goethe-Institut this event. Thank you very much.